Hello, everyone. I hope you guys are doing good, especially if you're a senior. I'm really going through it. We'll be fine, though. So, today we'll be talking about frauds and lies. And I know that sounds very boring, but trust me, you guys are going to need it, especially with today's technology. And there are actually many people that have gone scam before. It's actually a lot more common than you think. There's actually over 2.8 million people in America that reported fraud complaint to Federal Trade Commission. So when it comes to fraud, many people might think you cannot get scammed, but you'll actually be surprised by how easy it can be, in a sense, if you know the psychology behind it. So yeah, and today I'll be talking about two famous fraud cases. One of them you guys might know, the other one not really, only because of the name. But yeah, let me show you guys the importance of lying and how it's such a crucial part that plays in fraud. In today's episode of The Power of Lying, the true stories of famous fraudsters and their elaborate lies. So the two cases I'm actually going to be talking about is Elizabeth Holmes, who she is the most interesting, I think, out of the two, which she was more in the medical field and actually more in the science field. Yeah, she was in the medical field too, but mostly science. And the second one is actually John Fox, who ended up doing a wine scheme policy. I think that's what they call it. And he was more, I want to say, arrogant. Like, he was one of those guys that would show off because he had money, or actually because he stole people's money. And yeah, I'm gonna show you guys, I'm gonna tell you guys their stories, their background, and their lies, and their similarities, and also the psychology behind how they succeeded in their fraud. So I'll start with Elizabeth Holmes. Elizabeth Holmes was born in February 3rd, 1984. She grew up as a wealthy kid in Washington, and her family lived by status and connections. So I think they were very self-conscious, only because the way they got this type of status and connections was because their great-great-grandfather founded Fleischmann's yeast, which apparently revolutionized the bread industry. And at the age of 9, Elizabeth already set her in her mind that she was gonna discover something new, something that the world wasn't ready yet. And she actually wrote this herself in a letter to her father. And I think Elizabeth ended up doing that, but in a whole different way. She even got into Stanford. She was very, like any other college student, she was very stressed out. And by 2003, she actually ended up dropping out, and she founded the company Theranos. She was very ambitious. She did everything she could to want to show the world that her new discovery was going to change it. And it was a blood testing technology where it was going to make things easier in the medical field in many different ways. It was going to heal people, was going to just be something amazing. And the way her technology worked was they would prick your finger and only take 1 or 2 drops. That's what she claimed. And they would put it in this machine And in that machine, it'll run it into a computer and it'll make this like kind of like diagnosis, and it'll show you the diseases you might have on like what medical treatments you needed. So it was gonna be like we're gonna be ahead 10 years with that technology. But the issue is during the time that we're barely developing that, Elizabeth's ambition kind of pushed like the people she was working into forcing them to lie as well, because the science wasn't there. She knew it. People that were close to her knew it, but she still ended up pushing it, which actually ended up damaging some people, and it was very wrong. But in a short period of time, her company, by like 2014, had been a $9 billion company, and she was a self-made billionaire by 30. And if you actually go back to the time, it was like before 2018, I think that's when she was discovered that she was a fraud. She was actually loved by many. Like, she would go visit people in hospitals. She would like be cutting ribbons. She would like associate with people. She was actually considered the next Steve Jobs, and she actually played the part well, which I'll go over in a minute. And there were some testimonies in her trial case where people would go who had worked with her. She wouldn't even know what to say when you asked her how her machine worked. She wouldn't know the science. She wouldn't know the data. She will only give vague responses. But the funny thing is, many have reported that when you talk to her, she would make you feel like she's the smartest person in the room. At least that's what one of the scientists claims. That was actually, I think he was like a mentor or something, but he was like a lot older than her. He was like her senior. But yeah, like some of the lies she claimed was that her revolutionary blood testing that developed other methods to diagnose diseases. So it wasn't just her machine. She was finding other methods to do it. Also, she also said testing with just a few drops with no need of the use of needles, which I didn't really make sense to me, because I'm like, you're still gonna have to prick someone's finger, so how does that work? And she also fabricated some of her partnerships and endorsements. So she had many partnerships, don't get me wrong, but she over-exaggerated some of them, and there was actually some proof that some of her so-called partnerships were fabricated. She also had deceptive marketing practices, which I kind of found a bit confused, and so I realized she was manipulating data. So yeah, she was manipulating data. And in 2018, like I mentioned, she was actually trialed for massive fraud and also wire fraud and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. And she also argued that knowing she misled investors and patients about the capability of Theranos technology, Holmes actually denied these allegations, asserting that she genuinely believed in the technology's potential. However, in January 2022, she was found guilty on multiple counts of fraud, and her sentence was penned at that time. So while there's legal establishment that she misled investors and others, Holmes herself has maintained her innocence, though the legal process found otherwise. So even herself, she claims she's a victim. She even brought up during the case that her then boyfriend, who she had made him also a part of this, that he was sexually and physically abusing her. I didn't really read to that side, but there wasn't really proof of that. At least it was she said, he said type of deal. So yeah, but also for her, the psychology behind how she got away with it was very interesting to me. Like I mentioned, she was considered the next Steve Jobs, and because of that, she actually ended up dressing up like him, like his famous known style, black pants and also a black turtleneck. And it was very interesting because she started doing her makeup differently. She did her eyes in order to make her she made her eyelids with eyeshadow to make her eyes pop. And if anyone knows the psychology of that, that's actually very intriguing to the brain. And also like her red lipstick. And she also changed her demeanor. She was very serious. Like she was using her tone of voice change. She deepened it, and it like caught people's attention, and it just lured you in, and she knew how to use it to her advantage. And there's actually a show, Hulu made it. It's called The Dropout. I suggest you watch it. It's literally a mini series. I actually found it quite interesting. I didn't want to use that as a source. So yeah, that's Elizabeth Holmes. Very interesting individual. Up next, we have John Fox. And no, I am not speaking about that John Fox, the NFL coach, because that's what kept popping up every time I did my research. This is actually John Fox from California. He is known for the world's largest wine scheme that run with over $45 million through his store Premier Crew. And he ended up scamming over 10,000 customers, which I found wild because his scheme lasted over 20 years. That is until I discovered that he was working with a court judge named James Donato, and he ended up helping him run this scheme. And so he used some of the money, he parted some of the money to buy more wine in order for the scheme to keep going. But most of the money went to him. He used most of his money to buy expensive cars along with meeting women online. He also paid for his daughter's tuition, which I thought, okay, that's nice of you to do. But for the women, he ended up spending about $900,000 to take women out and pay for their company. And he was also seen in literally the same restaurant with different women. And my guy was married. So apparently he didn't care until I found out one other woman actually tried to blackmail him into sending her more money. Otherwise, he was going to tell his wife he was cheating. And the reason why I mention these women, because you could tell his personality is more like a show me off kind of guy. Like I mentioned earlier, he was actually, I don't want to cuss. He was a jerk. And like many of the waiters spoke about this, the people around him, very not a nice guy. But some of the lies that he had claimed was that the wine he had in display was actually like one of a kind wine. Sorry. I'm drinking Coke. But yeah, his wine was claimed to be like the most expensive and like one of a kind that no one had in their own like wine menu, and you need to come get his because it's so much. Rich people fell for this, but the thing is, he didn't just target rich people, he target everyone. If you wanted wine, this man will target you, and that's what he did. But the thing was, there was always something wrong. Most customers never received the wine they paid, or the wine came in very late, but the packaging wasn't expensive. It was very cheap. And the reason why it was cheap is because my man, John Fox, literally bought $30 to $40 worth of wine. Like each bottle was like $30 to $40, and he sold each bottle for up to $200 to $300 per bottle. And I actually ended up doing like the math in like one of the years, and it stated that 1 year he was able to get like $400,000 worth of money with just that loan. So yeah, that's one way. And he actually got sentenced for only 4 years. His sentence was actually way longer than that. The reason why it was cut to 4 years was because he actually showed the FBI how he basically snitched. He told the FBI how his scheme worked. And he didn't want like play for play on how he did it. And so I had questions. Even for me, I had questions. I was like, what similar lies did both of them tell to manipulate people into believing in them? And I think the similar lies for them was definitely that their products were one of a kind. Their products were a must, especially for Elizabeth. I think hers was more, I want to say, easier for people to believe, only because, for starters, it was a technology no one has ever done before. So we just believe what we see. That's how we are as humans. As for John, he was very, you know how to use language, and that's also another thing when it comes to fraud. You learn a lot on how to persuade people into getting what you want by using language. And I think John, we talked about this on one of the articles I found. There were 3 terms that people use. The God terms, which was words that were more on like the good side. Instead of using like, oh, good, they use like, oh, excellent, and words like that were like, the big vocabulary words, which actually like makes your brain kind of like, oh, I could trust this person. They know what they're talking about. That was literally Elizabeth and John. And how this kind of connects, you need to lie in order to get people to give you money. And that's what these two did. And I thought a lot of why these two ended up engaging in fraud. I have mentioned it. Elizabeth was I want to say she was kind of shadowed by where her family came from, and she wanted to be bigger than that. But I also think, I'm not diagnosing anyone, I don't know if it's true. And I tried looking it up, and I think Elizabeth might have some sort of like narcissistic type of tendencies. Sort of like narcissist traits, only because she was very demanding she had very high standards from her workers, and also when it came to like downplaying her work. And she was very narcissistic. Like I mentioned, she was very like portray herself as self-important, and some even, like I mentioned before, that she thought she was smarter than everyone. An author, John Carroy, who was author of Bad Blood, suggested that Holmes might have sociopath tendencies only because she lacked empathy and skewed moral compass. And the reason why he thinks this is because she used to fire people ruthlessly. Like, she did not care if you were there for so long. If you're like not working your butt off, she would fire you. For Hurley she was saying that she had some mental health issues, and they got a psychologist expert for this. So apparently, this is what they're saying, that she had testified about a mental disease or defect related to guilt. I don't know if that's true, but yeah, Elizabeth definitely had a lot of issues. As for John, I also think he might have had some sort of narcissist tendencies or sociopath tendencies, maybe. At least for both of them. I'm not diagnosing no one though. But yeah, there's that. John was known to be a jerk to everyone. That's just how that man is. As for the psychology, why do we fall for this? Why do we get scammed easily? Why does this happen to so many people? 2.8 million for 1 year of fraud complaints is a lot. And the reason why this happens is because you'll be surprised, there's a neurochemical in our brain called oxytocin. I apologize. It's actually a very it's a bond chemical, and you could even find this is mostly known as like the love hormone, but yeah, so this hormone is also a bonding hormone. So it's actually, we use it for our social life as well. And it's like released when it provides feeling of trust, empathy, and connection. And we even release this type of hormone with strangers. We want to trust people. That's in our nature. It's in our biology. We can't change that. So there's definitely into our language. John and Elizabeth. John and Elizabeth definitely used the power language. They knew what they were doing. They knew how to sound so confident and know what they were talking about, that no one would suspect a thing. Which I found it interesting, especially about those 3 terms that I spoke about: the God term, the devil's term, I think those are, and the charismatic term. And John definitely used a charismatic term. He was known for that. Like, he had that air around him. He was very confident in himself. As for Elizabeth, her voice, she lowered it so much that it was talked about a lot, how her voice ended up catching people's attention, how it was used to lure you in. If you look up Elizabeth Holmes on Google, one of the things that will pop up on the search bar was her voice. And another thing was they knew their mark. They knew who to target. John, he was mostly known to target rich people, but how do I say it? He targeted people that wanted to make themselves feel important. It was kind of like that greed, and most of us don't talk about that. Where whenever you think about, oh, you're being scammed or you were a victim of fraud, you automatically assume they were either vulnerable or like just easy, or they were in a bad place. But sometimes greed and ego plays a huge part, and it's just something that makes you want to feel superior on your peers. That's just how I view it, and that's how I think John targeted people. As for Elizabeth, she targeted people that were vulnerable. She was the opposite of John. She targeted people that were in need, health-wise. She would want people that were already desperate for that need of her technology. Like, oh, we can provide you the solution to what you're diagnosed with, because they would do the diagnosis and then they would give that person, after the diagnosis, they would give that person medical treatment. So she was putting people in danger. So yeah, that's some of the psychology behind fraud, and it's like, we are very easy to manipulate. That's just the truth. I know it's like, some people are like, oh, I can't be easily manipulated. You can. I can. You can. Everyone can. I think the best way, it is stated that for you not to get manipulated into, or like getting involved in a fraud or getting scammed, is by being conscious of your surrounding. Well, anyways, that was my episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. My throat hurts. I apologize if I sound kind of rusty, and my voice is kind of high-pitched too. But yeah, that was the power of lying, the true stories of famous fraudsters and their elaborate lies. Alright, hope you guys have a nice day. Bye.